I'm McKeon. I'm class of 2001. I'm also the current Director of Alumni Relations here at Albuquerque Academy. I'm thrilled to be back here as a staff member, and I'm truly honored to be introducing this awards presentation, which I think is a pretty remarkable tradition. I think we have many alums who are out there doing spectacular things, and we try our best to highlight as many of those individuals as we can, but we particularly have this presentation to showcase those individuals who truly go above and beyond. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Alumni Council member, Mark Herman, who is head of our awards committee, which is the committee in charge of selecting these award winners. Without further ado, Mark Herman, class of 1987.
All right, before the introduction of the awards recipients, I want to provide you with some background concerning the two awards, the Distinguished Alumni Award and the Young Alumni Service Award. In 2003, the Albuquerque Academy Alumni Council set out to establish an alumni recognition program, including setting the criteria for the award. The first Distinguished Alumni Award was presented in the spring of 2005 and has been presented annually since. The Distinguished Alumni Award recognizes Albuquerque Academy alumni who have made a significant contribution to their community or to society, or who have demonstrated an exceptional level of achievement in a worthy cause, career, or application. The Distinguished Alumni Award is presented to recognize extraordinary achievement or service that exemplifies the principles and values of the Albuquerque Academy. It may honor an individual for one noteworthy act, or for many years of effort and accomplishment. The intent is to recognize members of the Academy community making significant contributions to society more than to highlight persons merely on the basis of human interests or fascinating and unusual life stories. The Young Alumni Service Award has a shorter history. It was established in 2010 to recognize and honor younger alums who may not yet have achieved the overall success necessary for consideration for the Distinguished Alumni Award, but whose early success is clearly noteworthy and worthy of commendation. The Young Alumni Service Award recognizes Albuquerque Academy alumni who graduated within the prior 10 years and who have made significant personal achievements in serving the local, national, or international community. The awards focus on community service, stems from the Academy's robust community service program, and exemplifies the spirit of the Albuquerque Academy mission. Recipients have demonstrated dedicated volunteer service to others and have developed, implemented, or participated in a program, event, or special outreach effort that improves the lives of others. In addition, they exhibit leadership and creative ability in addressing and solving societal problems. Each year, the Council is presented with many qualified candidates for these two awards, and selecting the honorees is not an easy task, and is made more difficult by the fact that the decisions must be made quickly. Last fall, I chaired a committee whose task it was to identify and review the candidates for these awards and recommend finalists to the full Alumni Council. I'd like to thank the committee, John Leggett, Melissa Klein, Carol Bauer, and Don Smith, for working diligently and thoughtfully. I'd also like to thank Valerie McKeon, Director of Advancement for Alumni Relations, and her team for assisting the committee by gathering the biographies and other information about the candidates. So please join me in a round of applause for Valerie and her team for all the work they've done. So without stealing any of the thunder of the introductions to come, I just wanted to say that it really was an honor to serve on the committee and look through all of the different applications and nominations that we got. So many amazing people coming out of this school. And I think the committee would want me to mention that the thing that really touched us about the two you're going to hear about tonight is not only that they're involved in serving their communities, but they really have made service and serving others a way of life and a way of their being. So we were very moved by that and touched by that. And I know you're going to hear more about that. So without further ado, Stephanie Lipkowitz will do our first introduction. Thank you.
So I'm Stephanie. It doesn't. Is that too? That's too high there. So I'm Stephanie Lipkowitz, and if you don't know me, I'm the assistant head of school at Albuquerque Academy, and I've been here for 25 years. It's hard to believe. So I had the good fortune to be Tomas Atencio Pacheco's English teacher his senior year, which also coincidentally was the year I gave birth to my first child. Given my level of sleep deprivation and new parent nerves that year, it is a wonder I can remember anything at all about the class of '99. Excuse me. Yet Tomas absolutely stands out in my memory. His lively presence in class each day, his deadpan humor, his intellectual curiosity, and his kindness and spirit. Tomas's impact on me as his teacher is a reflection, I think, of just what a unique and compassionate person he was as a teenager, and how so many of these qualities propelled him along the path that has now brought us to honor him today. High school teachers tend to be of that strange species who love teenagers. And for me, Tomas was that perfect kind of teenager. He was a kid who was wide awake to life, deeply engaged with ideas, fiercely loyal to his friends, ready for life's experiences with a sense of adventure and open heart. Tomas came to class expecting to learn and ready to connect with others, his classmates and me. His junior year English teacher, John Gray, wrote of him, "Tomas watches algebra like TV and eats his lunch like Socrates." John Gray is another person with a deadpan sense of humor. But what Mr. Gray was getting at was Tomas's mindfulness, even as a 17-year-old. His mind was always at work, even eating lunch, and he often found learning highly entertaining. I think that love of learning came in part because of his own intrinsic interests, but also because he truly is a connector, someone who really listens, engages with what others are thinking or experiencing in the world. When Tomas was at the academy, he brought his authentic self to every endeavor. His teachers routinely called him a joy, praised his upbeat effervescence, and even when the learning or running cross-country got really tough, noted his tenacity. He was a kid who did not give up or take the easy way out, ever. A quick, funny story. Tomas was also a musician here, and he practiced jazz so religiously that he once told his music teacher, "I think my trumpet is tired of me." Tomas comes from a family with deep roots in New Mexico, and his parents cared deeply about their children's education, instilling in both Tomas and Chamisa, his sister, a sense of social justice and responsibility to give back to whatever community they found themselves in. I have nearly as vivid memories of Consuelo and Tomas Sr. as I do of their son. They were involved in our school, warm and effusive in their appreciation of the ways that we cared for Tomas and Chamisa. Our school's mission of inclusion and outreach fit well with the ethical backbone of the Atencio Pacheco family. And now, as an adult, Tomas is living out our core mission and his most deeply held values in the most profound of ways. He has devoted himself to educating some of this city's most vulnerable students who have experienced deep disruption in their lives and who have not found success in regular schools. At the Health Leadership High School, Tomas partners with teachers across the curriculum to create interdisciplinary project-based learning modules that directly target these students' social, emotional, and learning needs. Anyone who's worked in a charter school serving vulnerable students and families understands the time and emotional commitment this kind of work takes. Tomas commits himself to his students fully, as he also devotes himself to his young family, and for most of last year went home several times a week to help his mother care for his father during the last year of his father's life. The teen we remember with such affection and tenderness has become a man who extends himself faithfully and compassionately as a father, son, husband, and teacher in a daily, matter-of-fact kind of way. Last night we had dinner together. Tomas said to me, "What teaching all boils down to really is relationships." Though it is a simple idea for me and for so many of the teachers at the Academy, our relationships with students like Tomas are what sustain and motivate us as teachers year after year. Relationships, however, cannot be taken for granted. They require of us authenticity, hope, and dedication, all of which are Tomas's great gifts. I can't think of a more deserving recipient of our Young Alumni Service Award for 2015, and I'm very pleased to present you Tomas Atencio Pacheco. Here, we can put it back.
Okay. 1 second. I didn't know we could hear speeches up here. Not that. All right. Hopefully this speech works. I wasn't sure who I was going to be talking to, but we'll just start, right? So, hello. First of all, I'd like to thank the Albuquerque Academy. This school provided me my academic and professional foundation. It honed my ability to think, introduced me to amazing friends, and endless connections and relationships that continue to better my life. I am truly grateful for their generosity and recognition tonight. Sadly, my mom couldn't make it because she caught a bad case of the flu. However, I do want to say thank you to her and my father in spirit. They always stressed the importance of education and with sacrifice provided it for me through the Academy, as well as life. Of course, moms know best, and this is no exception. My father passed away this summer, and I miss him most in moments like these. His insight and wisdom provided a perspective I don't have. So anyways, I'd like to say thanks to my dad and mom for always supporting me in my practical and impractical ideas. They were my biggest fans, even when I was in a slump. I can only hope to be half the parents they were to my kids. Well, for me, for my kids as they were to me. Speaking of kids, I'd also like to thank my little family, and this includes my wife, Milagro, who helped me with this speech, and our 3 kids, Milas, Marvel, and Azul. They are the reasons I get up and go to work every day. It's a lot of mouths to feed. I can't miss a paycheck. Just kidding. They are reminders that teaching is not just a job, but a means to go out and make the world a better place for them. Right now, they are the best encouragement to keep working as hard as I can. When I first discovered I won this award, I didn't know why. All I was doing what I enjoy. I chose education because I like working with youth, and I felt that the rest of Albuquerque's kids, you know, the ones who aren't lucky enough to attend the Albuquerque Academy, deserve the same type of education, or as close to it as possible. When I entered education, my biggest shock was that not everyone sees learning as an inherently pleasurable human experience. At the Academy, this is ingrained in the culture. The classroom bleeds out into the hallways and past the perimeter to dinner tables and park benches. It sets an exciting precedent for life, one I hope to instill in my students. But during my time in the classroom, I've also had another epiphany. Stephanie talked about this a little bit. That teaching and learning is more than the consumption of information and its analysis or evaluation. It is about something different, something the Academy always had right. I didn't recognize it at the time, but it was that learning and teaching is about relationships. As learners, we sunk deep into the heart of darkness as Miss Lipkowitz steered the boat down the river, or The Catcher in the Rye became our first glimpse of mortality, or at least the end of youth, as Dr. Reese helped us show us the phonies. Learning the importance of hydrogen bonds to life came with Miss Orndorff's wry sense of humor, or the value of Greek classics had Dr. Field's calm, structured, methodical approach. Learning is an emotional experience at its best, and the Academy provided that. They provided me with the mentors, leaders, and confidence. They provided all of us with what we need to become resilient leaders grounded in our beliefs. What I think we forget, and I took for granted, is that the Academy is a privilege. Even if we do not come from wealth, the Academy gave us privilege, cultural capital, and this doesn't dissipate because it becomes part of who we are. It is confidence and pride and grit, empathy, compassion, and creativity, perspective, patience, and high standards. This privilege should be shared. It is a moral responsibility. We live in a country which has health outcomes of a developing world for some of its residents and amazing ones for others. Social mobility is low and continues to sink. The American dream becomes more of that, a dream. At its best, it is described as unfortunate, and at its worst, it is a true travesty. We turn our eyes when children who grew up in poverty become adults who live in poverty, and then pass judgment on them. We dehumanize people of color and find ways to rationalize racism and bigotry. Fixing the world is a huge burden and a daunting task that no one individual can bear, but one I feel that the Academy prepared us for. There is no single approach, but please remember, if we can't see the humanity in each other, build and enjoy relationships, then what's the point? I'm passionate about what I do. It doesn't mean I don't go home exhausted, frustrated, or disenchanted. But my work is my approach towards paying it forward, and all of us have our own way. And I think part of my drive comes from my experience here in order to do so. My parents made sure that my success wouldn't end with me, and it continues through me. And I think that most of the world's problems are socially constructed, and I truly believe that is the expectation of every Academy grad is to pay their privilege forward. Appreciate your parents for the choices and sacrifices they made to provide this privilege, and work towards recognizing the humanity of everyone, because it'll help us to make better choices that are based out of love and hope instead of fear or anger. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomas, and congratulations again. Our next presenter is Associate Head of School and Faculty Member Don Smith.
Good evening. I can officially tell you I am also the oldest of the old fogies here. It is my distinct pleasure this afternoon to introduce this year's recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Award, Christine Haines Robinson, class of 1985. This award is given, as Mark said, this award is given annually to an Albuquerque Academy alum in recognition of extraordinary achievement or service that exemplifies the mission, principles, and values of Albuquerque Academy. As you will soon hear, Chris is eminently deserving of such recognition. I should ask that I am fully aware that such attention focused on her makes her uncomfortable. She was like that as a student, and she continues to be like that as an adult. She is definitely one who does not seek the limelight, although there are certain times when a bright light needs to be shown on someone who has been such an exceptional member of her various communities. And I promised her ahead of time, no more than 30 minutes. Promise. Chris moved from the academy to Rice, where she volunteered in a rape crisis center and graduated magna cum laude with a double major in economics and managerial studies and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. Then she went on to Stanford, where she graduated from the law school. In between these two events, she volunteered for a year in an orphanage in Venezuela. She then, after law school, entered private practice in Houston as a patent lawyer, clerked for a federal judge for a year, and after that was finished, she was hired by the U.S. government as an assistant United States attorney, where she currently specializes in white-collar crimes. So watch it. Along the way, Chris has earned an impressive list of awards. While here, the Richard Harper Memorial Award, the Faculty Award, and numerous academic awards as well. Chris was also one of our very first presidential scholars, and if you don't know what that is, there's a scholar selected from each state, one scholar per year, and Chris was the New Mexico Scholar for 1985. That's a big deal. She was a highly accomplished musician, playing the flute and selected for the Albuquerque Youth Symphony where she was the first chair. At Rice, she was awarded the Henry S. Truman Scholarship and the Wall Street Journal Award for being the top student in economics in her graduating class. In 2013, she was awarded the U.S. Department of Justice's highest award offered to attorneys for contributions and excellence in specialized areas of legal performance. All of this is awfully impressive, but it really doesn't tell you who Chris is. And when she was here, I never had the good fortune of being her teacher. I was her dean for 2 years. Most of your detentions have been served. It's okay. Chris was a constant, positive presence and one of the nicest people we have ever worked with here. I say that having seen a lot of them. Someone who worked very hard, earned very high grades, and did it with a smile and a wonderful sense of humor. When a student wins a Presidential Scholar Award, he or she gets to pick a faculty member to accompany them to the White House for the presentation. Chris asked former assistant headmaster and English teacher Walt Daub to join her in this ceremony. And a month, 6 weeks ago, I happened to call Walt, and I told him that Chris was going to receive this award. And I asked him, I remember, she got the presidential award, and you went with her, and he said yes. And then what he told me is, as part of that ceremony, he received a plaque or a certificate. It is still on the wall in his home, and it is one of his most prized possessions. Last night, Chris asked me about Walt, and I couldn't say anything, so now I can. In Chris's day, we took all the ninth graders, including the brand new girls. Now remember, back in the bad old days, girls did not come into the academy until ninth grade. And one of the lovely things that we used to do to all the kids, all the new ninth grade girls, was we would take them on a 4-day backpacking trip. And in those days, the days that Chris came in, the backpacking trip was in Bandelier National Forest. And if you've ever been in Bandelier, you will know that it's basically straight up and straight down. One might reasonably have expected Chris to seek an exemption from the trip. She would have nothing to do with that. And one of my I drove the bus for the kids going up to Bandelier. And one of the more vivid memories I have is that Chris joined her classmates for the first day on her horse, Frosty. And that was just typical of how Chris approached anything. She was in no way disabled. She just happened to ride around in a wheelchair. Chris and her husband, Jim, are the proud parents of 2 daughters, Jessica and Lisa. Unfortunately, they cannot be here with us this weekend since their schools actually track absences. Who knew? Chris and Jim are also active foster parents for children who need a temporary place to live while courts sort out their various situations. I know Andy is going to speak to this in a minute, and I don't mean to steal his thunder, but I see a number of retired faculty here who will appreciate that the Chris Haines door is now formally the Chris Haines door. It's about time. And if you don't get that, don't worry about it, the faculty will. I will now stop embarrassing Chris. Thank you. And just say we are deeply honored to have her as an alum and admire her for continuing the work that she began here as a student and continuing on that stretch into her adult life. It is with great pleasure that I give you our 2015 Distinguished Alumni, Christine Haines Rollinson.
like a weapon.
It's a sizable piece of knobhead.
Yeah. Thank you.
She is nothing if not resilient.
I'm going to move over a little because I can't see anybody on the other side. Well, thank you all for coming. We'll see if I can kind of work out the microphone and the papers here. And thank you, Mr. Smith. It's kind of weird. I'm 47 and I need to call you Mr. Smith, not Don, because you'll always be Mr. Smith. It's been many years since I've been in Albuquerque. It's a pleasure to be back on the campus. I have many, many good memories of being here, including classmates happily hucking snowballs at me as I was sliding down an icy hill in my wheelchair, trying to get to band practice out here. And that kind of sounds like a bad scene from an after-school special, trying to teach us something. But really, it was just a wonderful experience to have friends and classmates who really didn't care whether I was in a wheelchair or not. And I was very pleased about the Chris Haines door, because they put that through a window so I could get into the class. And yeah, that is my door, and I'm very proud of having a window door. The Academy is a special place. It's a place where I learned to work hard and think critically, write clearly, solve problems, and pursue excellence. And those are good things to learn for life. The teachers here were smart and interesting and dedicated. Everybody was a bit younger then, but I was definitely well prepared when I went to college. And I'm grateful I was able to spend my high school years here. It's an honor to return these many years later to receive the Distinguished Alumni Award, and I thank you for that. I think it's wonderful that the Academy is promoting community service. And yesterday I spoke with some students with Connect, the Connect Service Club, and the Community Service Executive Board about the different things that students here are trying, the different charitable foundations they're working for, and the projects they're doing to try to improve the world and make their community a better place to live. So for my remarks here today, I'll give you a brief outline of how volunteering has fit into my life and the various stages and what I've been doing, and then share a few thoughts about what I'd give to students about working three things into one's life: foreign travel, raising a family, and finding satisfying volunteer activities. I grew up in the valley riding my horse and showing chickens at the state fair, not simultaneously. My parents were educators, and they sacrificed to send me and my brother Paul here to the Academy so we could get a first-class education. Apparently that worked out well because I'm a lawyer and he's a doctor, so they were rewarded there. Paul's with me here today because this is his high school reunion too. And he's 2 years younger than I am, but as Mr. Smith referenced, he started here before I did because girls weren't allowed then until 9th grade. After graduating the Academy, I attended Rice University in Houston, and as Mr. Smith mentioned, worked for the Rape Crisis Center, the hotline, and accompanying victims. My boyfriend Jim and I also counseled and visited kids in the juvenile detention center who'd been identified as not having anybody visiting them. And I eventually married Jim, and then we went to Venezuela and worked with abandoned children, which was just a great experience that we learned a lot about, and it was prior to Hugo Chavez and all the problems in Venezuela, so it was still okay then. After that, I attended Stanford in California and worked at the free legal clinic there, learned about all the problems that poor people have with employment and landlords and all that, and learned a little bit of law that way. My husband and I also went while I was at Stanford to Costa Rica, and I spent a semester in San Jose working for the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, deciding that I really didn't like international law, but it was still neat to be in another country. After law school, I worked for a commercial law firm, and while there, I mainly worked because the hours are ridiculous, but worked on church committees, and they'd allow pro bono work, and so worked a little with family law and child protective services adoptions. Eventually, after we'd paid back law school loans, my husband and I started a family, and I took a couple years off work to be with my first child, and then went back to work part-time and worked just 10 or 20 hours a week. I had to negotiate that, but it worked really well because I had time for my daughter at home, but I was also able to have adult interaction and intellectual challenges at work. Eventually, my husband and I decided to take classes and become foster parents. And when my daughter was 4, we cared for an abused 3-year-old child. Then stopped fostering because I got pregnant and took a break from that, and then went back to it when my kids were older, like 13 and 7. And so we just do that on and off. And currently, my kids are 18 and 12, and we have a foster child who's in 5th grade. And I wanted to talk a little bit about employment, because when my second daughter had gone back to school, I went to clerk for a new appellate judge on the 5th Circuit, and I'd always wished that I had done that after law school, which is when most people do it. So it was a bit of an unusual path to take, but it kind of goes to show you that you can sometimes do things out of order if you're creative or willing to jump at a new opportunity. So that worked out great for me, and when my clerkship ended, I moved into government service with the U.S. Attorney's Office, where I'd always kind of wanted to be. That office prosecutes federal crimes and works with agents from FBI and other federal agencies. And I specialize in criminal forfeiture, which is the asset part and trying to get that back to the victim. So it can be aggravating. There are shutdowns where they either tell you not to come to work or you need to come to work, but you're not going to get paid and good things like that. But overall, I found government service very rewarding and would recommend it, especially to lawyers, because you have the discretion to handle your own cases, and the shared mission of the office is to do justice instead of just pleasing the private client. The people in cases can be really, really interesting, and you feel like you and your colleagues are accomplishing something for society. So now I'll move on to the 3 areas I mentioned earlier, the first one being foreign travel. Only about 1/3 of U.S. citizens have a passport, and most Americans don't ever go and see other ways of life and learn about cultures other than their own. And I think that's important in helping you learn that there are a lot of people who have less than you do, and you try to figure out ways to help. But that's something that is best done when you're young. I'm very glad we went before we had a mortgage and children, and we're still young and strong and able to put up with really bad buses and things like that. So I recommend that young people do try to study or volunteer abroad for a time. That helps them gain a different perspective on how people think and on how societies are run. So we tend to think whatever we're doing is normal, and it's just one of many ways, really. It helps them learn what life's like for other people, especially the poor, and it helps us appreciate how lucky we are to live here in the United States with conveniences and freedoms and the social safety net. In Venezuela, we lived in a concrete block building. The mattresses were rock hard. There were cold showers out of a water storage tank, and the toilets didn't flush unless you'd get a pitcher of water and kind of pour it in the back of the tank. And that's how these kids grew up. You know, they were used to that. We lived with a few other volunteers and 15 or 20 kids, and they attended the local public school. So we'd tutor them and help prepare meals and supervise them as we all washed clothes by hand. But they were joyful. They'd play on the hills, they'd slide down tires, they'd fly these kites that they'd make out of paper bags that actually flew with sticks in them and string. And it kind of shows you the resilience of the human spirit and the ability of children to thrive wherever if they're given some attention. So the other thing I'll say about that children's home was we had donated food. And the most interesting food we ate was spaghetti, because it was donated from the factory, and they'd make the spaghetti, and they'd cut off the ends. And so we'd get these little pieces of spaghetti about 1 inch long, and that's what we'd have for dinner. And then we had our own chickens and avocado treats. So we had a lot of scrambled eggs with avocado. And then my brother Paul and a friend came to visit and brought us chocolate chips and salsa, which we had requested because we couldn't find any there. And we made chocolate chip cookies for the kids. And the kids complained because they thought those were black beans. Never had a chocolate chip cookie. And I think a lot of people have known, and studies have now shown, that one of the keys to being happy is gratitude and knowing how much you have. And I think that's a really good, studying abroad or volunteering abroad is a really good way to see that and realize how lucky we are here compared to people in less developed countries. So later on in law school, my husband and I went to Costa Rica for a semester, and we had our own apartment and could buy our own food, even though we had to walk to the store because we didn't have a car. But that was another shot of how different life can be somewhere else. You know, the working was very laid back. Every morning you'd have a half-hour coffee, and everybody would just kind of chit-chat. And It was quite a contrast with my first law school job. Job out of law school with a private firm with the billable hours and everything. And it's just, I think it's good to see a different way of life. So I'd recommend college students go abroad, but even once you're a parent, you can take opportunities to go places and do things. A couple of years ago, we took our daughters on just a week-long mission trip to Costa Rica, where we were building a kitchen for a church and seeing the children's feeding program in a really poor neighborhood that was just plagued by gangs. And that made an impression on the kids, and I'm glad we went there. They played with these kids, but just couldn't believe what they didn't have. So that brings me to the second area I wanted to touch on here, which is raising a family. It's hard to find a balance, especially for women who work, but it's worth it to try, and spending time with them pays real dividends then and then later when they're teenagers. And I think of it as life being in stages. The stage where you have no kids, the stage where you're really, really busy with young kids, then when your kids are in school, then when your kids are teenagers and off and about, and later, eventually, when you're empty nesters. And your work life is really quite long, so you have time to do different things in it. And I never thought when I was here at the academy that I'd work part-time, or that my husband would be a stay-at-home dad. But that's what we did because that's what ended up working for our family. And so I just encourage people to think about those things. You know, I've bounced back and forth between part-time work and full-time work, and ended up having a great career. So you can do that if you just kind of think about it ahead of time. And the third area I want to talk about is finding volunteer work that fits your life stage and fits your talents and preferences. Whatever your motivation, God or a general desire to help or empathy for people who are hurting, making time to volunteer has to be a deliberate choice because everybody's busy, and so you have to set aside time for it. But the activity you pick needs to fit your passions and your life stage, because there are many worthy causes to invest in, and you have to choose one. So right now, since my husband and I have children in school, what works for us is incorporating an extra child into our family, rather than going out and doing something. And that's an issue we feel passionately about. So these kids are abused and neglected and caught up in the addiction and mental illnesses of their parents, and they need someone to help them. So in Texas, you can kind of choose. I don't know how it works here, but you can choose. So we've said, well, we'll take girls only, and just one or two at a time. And that way it works for your family. And that's been a wonderful thing, a rewarding thing for Jim and me, and it's also taught our children some important lessons. Back when I was in college, fostering wouldn't work, but the right prices worked, because I could get up at 2 a.m. and go to the hospital with someone. And so that's why I think the life stage is important. You can change what you're doing and make it fit. So when trying to give back to your community, I think it's important to do what you like so that you don't have burnout. It's something you look forward to, not something you dread. It's something that makes you feel good, but also something that fits your talents and your preferences. For example, I don't do boards. We need people on the boards of various charities. We need people on committees. I've tried that. That is not me. That does not work for me. And I'm glad there are people who are good at it, but I'm doing much better with the fostering. I do better with individual children, not groups. So I was a substitute Sunday school teacher, hated managing a classroom, apparently not teaching material. So we'll let Tomas take care of the kids, and I'll just have 1 or 2 at a time, and that works out a lot better. So that's about all I wanted to say, just those 3 interwoven concepts that have helped me to live a satisfied life: the foreign travel, the attention to family, and finding a volunteer work that matches your talents, preferences, and your life stage. So thank you again for the honor of inviting me here, and I appreciate it. I'm sure I'll see some of you at dinner. Thank you.
So let me add my thanks to Mark Herman and his committee, the Alumni Council led by Christina Sheehan, and our Alumni Office led by Valerie McKeon. And my congratulations to our 2 very impressive nominees this year. You guys are living our mission in different ways. You know, if you were the same age and lived in the same town, you'd be best friends. And you'd be hell on wheels in terms of all the things you would do to make the world a better place. I'm so proud of you guys. It is our mission. We talk about it a lot. It's an abstraction sometimes for our students, but then in the lives of our graduates, it fully flourishes and it makes a difference. It's hard to believe, but we're in our 11th year of the Distinguished Alumni Award. I still remember us gathering in the West Campus dining hall and hearing Grant Bauer tell some hilarious stories about Martin Chavez from the class of '81 and the computerized dating service program he wrote back in the early days of personal computing. The humor resided in the fact that Grant convinced Martin to make sure that Carol Candelaria was the outcome of the data entry, and they've now been married for a long time. Martin is now in charge of technology for Goldman Sachs, so I don't know what he does with the data there. Since then, we've honored Deb Cantrell from the class of '78, Laura Hood Watchman from the class of '89, Thomas Casey posthumously after his death serving our country in Iraq, defending his team in an ambush. David Eagleman from the class of '89. Watch for David presenting and hosting the PBS series In the Brain this fall. Jonathan Wolfe from the class of '88, the amazing Fractal Man here in town. Norman Bay from '78, just named the head of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Joshua Ramo from '87, with a new book coming out, I believe. Ian McKinnon, now on our board and helping the school in many ways. And Gary Gordon from the class of '79, steering us through great complexity with great skill here at the school. And now Chris and Tomas. Our newer tradition, the Distinguished Young Alumni Award, is in its 6th year. Previous winners were Kristen Klaus from '07, Tara Perea from '06, Will Hilland in '06, Neely Crane Smith from '02, and Consuelo Gonzalez from '04. As you can imagine, it's hard to choose each year because our alums have done remarkable work in just about all professions and all realms of expression. We had a small ceremony yesterday, one that held a bit of a surprise for Chris. For those of you who don't know this, there's an access ramp on the north side of Brown Hall, the one that goes to the faculty, a faculty pod now. For old timers, this has always been known, as Don said, as the Chris Haines door. Built back in the days when our country was just starting to get its act together when it comes to improving buildings to ensure that physical barriers don't shut anyone out. When Chris arrived as a 9th grader, the Academy wasn't as prepared as we are today to support someone in a wheelchair. Past faculty member and administrator Walter Bucky, of course, for those of you who know him, made a very Bucky-like speech last night at the ceremony, describing Chris's arrival at the school. His comments and the stories that Smitty tells me describe one of the most determined and delightful students we've ever had. That determination has led to a life of good work and service to others. It makes us very proud. So anyway, the secret ceremony unveiled 2 things. First of all, the official designation with an inscription on the rock that this is indeed the ramp and the door to honor Chris. And then the creation of the Chris and Haines Rawlinson Fund. This fund was started by Chris's brother, Paul, who encouraged numerous friends and classmates to contribute up to the point where we could make an official endowed fund. It's $35,000. The purpose of the fund, I'll bet a lot of you guys could guess, is to provide resources in the future whenever we admit a student needing support, such as a ramp, perhaps, or a door, in order to attend and find success here. And as this fund grows ever larger in the future, we'll ensure that students like Chris and Rachel Kolb more recently, and others we've known, will enrich our community, and then over time their talents and character will make the world a better place. The inscription on the rock reads, "Creating doors where there appear to be none." That describes the fund very well, but more expansively, it is another manifestation of our broader mission of providing opportunity to students and families throughout the community. And I'd be remiss to point out, since so many of you are supporters of the school, that each time one of you makes a contribution towards our financial assistance efforts, you are indeed creating doors where there appear to be none. So have fun, alumni, for the rest of the events over the weekend, from the educational classes you go to tomorrow, to the physical things, the 5K and the hikes tomorrow, to the family, the meals and activities and rockets and science, to the artistic. The before and after display in the Heritage Room right now of student art from our alums, both when they were students and now. It's just stunning. And the emotional. If you're here, I'd love to have you join me at 11:15 at the Medicine Wheel tomorrow. We have a ceremony we've been doing for quite a few years, honoring all the folks we've lost over the history of the school, and also those emotional moments when you just reconnect with your wonderful classmates. We'll continue to build our traditions and our community for life. We're actually doing that right now because we're still in the midst of our Alma Mater contest. Have you been paying attention to our Alma Mater contest? I'm kind of worked up about this. We had 11 entries and we're down to 4, and they're going to take your breath away when you finally hear them, because we're going to let you comment before we make our decisions. We try to build these traditions because this is a special place in all of our hearts, because it made a lasting impression on our lives, and because we're committed to doing the same for children and families far into the future. Thank you, Chris, Tomas, all you Chargers out there. for helping us build one of the finest independent schools in the nation with the best independent school mission. Have fun this weekend and stay connected for life.
Thank you, Andy, and another thanks to Don and Stephanie for presenting today. Can we give one more round of applause to our award winners, Christine and Mark?